got to pick up topic. So I wanted to talk about user groups because I love user groups. Now Aslam stole my pitch, but I'm going to repeat it anyway because it's also my too long didn't listen. So here's the TLDL for my presentation. User groups are based on carefully selected things in common. That leaves room for a diversity which enriches our learning, sharing, and creating. So user groups, they're awesome because they're based on a carefully selected things to have in common. That leaves room for a diversity which enriches our learning, sharing, and creating. Yeah. And Dan North talked about deliberate learning. I think that user groups is a really an outstanding, actually, place for deliberate learning. And I'm going to try to explain why I think that user groups is such a good place for this. And the awesome thing with sharing knowledge is that as long as your knowledge isn't a complete subset or totally a subset of someone else's, you can actually share knowledge. So if someone knows this much and I know this much, as long as my this much is over here, we can exchange knowledge. And if I know this much and you know this much, as long as they don't overlap totally, we can share knowledge. And that shows that diversity is a good thing. And it doesn't have to be ethnical or gender diversity or things that you often think about as diversity. It can also be that you come from two different companies that use two different frameworks. You could say that I can learn from my friends. I don't have to go to a user group. I know a lot of techie people. We often go for beer. But do you advertise your beer hangouts openly so that anybody can join? A cool thing about user groups is that you never know who would show up. The only thing you know is that this part you've selected, that it's a thing you have in common, will be something that they also like or is interested in. So you never know who would show up, but you also always know that it will be the right people showing up. So friends, it's a closed group and they often have a lot of things in common. Therefore, I think the user groups are better for deliberate learning. But workplaces, anybody could show up at my workplace. I mean, if my boss employs them, they will be there, right? And a lot of workplaces enjoys new people coming in. It's really worthful for a group when new people enters. When you got that newbie that sees your code for the first time, capturing their experience from that is really, really valuable. But you only have that many new people, at least if you are a functional team, and you don't have that much time to explore new things. I mean, you're doing your you're having your framework that you work with, you're having your language. Perhaps there's something really nice out there, but how would you know? Because you don't have all the time to explore everything that's out there. So going to a user group is a really cheap way to see what you don't know anything about yet. That second degree of ignorance that Dan North talks about. Another thing with workplaces is that it can also be a quite strong culture that shows what's okay, what's good. Perhaps you're not allowed to show yourself ignorant and vulnerable at some workplaces. At Foo Café, that should always be okay. I mean, until you learn something, nobody knows anything until they've learned it. So the most things in the world you're ignorant about. And that's okay. Okay, but why do we need to have a user group? Why couldn't it be just separate events? I think it's beneficial to get to know people. If I have a problem and I go to an event, I don't know who knows anything about this. But if I get to know people at user group, I could see that, oh, but I could ask this person about this because they talked about something similar last time. So one event lacks the continuity can't you? Yeah, the belonging together that a user group has. And the last but not least is that being a programmer might be a quite lonely profession. We don't really have to cooperate to build software. You can sit alone and do it. Or you can be two people but don't really have a sense of team. I've been to teams that felt more like 5 separate people than an actual team. So use your community. Find a user group where you feel that you can belong and share knowledge with the people that you get to know there. So, too long didn't listen. User groups are based on carefully selected things to have in common. That leaves room for a diversity which enriches the learning, sharing, and creating. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.